and the whole stands is Key West people, and Miss Webster, getting up there doing the "Give me a K," the Key West thing, and that whole island, everyone up there. Those things stand out to me, and and me growing up, and Bobby Menendez speeches before games, just everything, all those things, and it just is ingrained in my soul, and always feeling like it's us against everyone else. And Key West people always have each other's backs no matter what, and the island mentality. And that's just always been, it's just part of ingrained, like I say, ingrained in me. And it's just special. It's so special. And, we see it every year. We cheer for our kids no matter what, and we come together. And it's something that's so unique. And we are still a one team, one town mentality, that old school mentality of, you cheer for your high school where you grow up, you go to the high school where you grow up, which kind of is a lost thing around in a lot of places now, especially in Florida.
Thanks for tuning in to the Conch, a Bring Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Newlish. I'm a first-generation Conch raised by a fourth. What does that add up to? A whole lot of Conch pride. And that's what this show is all about, celebrating the incredible people of Key West and their stories from every corner of our Conch community. So sit back and relax, cuz. Let's do this thing. How we doing, Conch fans? I've got a good one for you today. We're talking with Key West High School wrestling coach, Chaz Jimenez. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joy.
Hey, Coach, I want to come clean. I don't know much about wrestling. The only thing I know about wrestling is Dusty Rhodes' bionic elbow.
It's different wrestling, but yeah.
You know about Dusty Rhodes?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, but I tell you what, I don't know much about how to keep score with wrestling and all that, but I know a lot about your program. Let me see how I do. You got about 25, 26 years of history since the program started, 250 wins, 19 district titles, 16 in a row, which you and your team accomplished in 2025. What do we got? 2 state champions. Many of our wrestlers have made it to the state match to compete and represented well. We've got several of our wrestlers/football players have made it onto college to either wrestle or play football, which I want to talk about that connection too. You started a girls wrestling program that's very successful already. And on top of that, you have a youth wrestling program, the Conch Republic Wrestling. So what I missed, Coach?
You covered a lot, and then I don't even know the number of state placers, but we have a lot of state placers over the last 20 plus years. I think in myself alone, I think I've had close to 40 state placers. So we've had a lot of state placers as well. Regional runner-up finishes, top 10 finishes in the state, top 5 finishes in the state.
To say you're a winning program is not bragging. It's truthful. We can back it up with the numbers.
Right.
So let's go back to the history. Let's go back those 25, 26 years because you've been part of the program almost the entire time. I don't know if anyone knows the program better than you. Go back, take me back through the history. Let's talk about some of the coaches that have been part of the program, some of the wrestlers, and some of the key moments that have made this Conch wrestling program so strong.
Yeah, so it all came together at the right time. Coach Jerry Hughes was my football coach. And he has always been a big proponent for wrestlers playing football and how just having a wrestling program helps the football program. And especially coming from Southridge, where they've always had a powerhouse wrestling program, and that's where he coached football for a good amount of time and had a lot of success. And so he was trying to get that started. At the same time, we had some people in Key West that were on staff here at Key West High School, Troy Bow, and he was one. He also coached football, and then we had some people in the community that were trying to get wrestling started. So, just so happened that we had this guy Bob Krantz, who is a big proponent for wrestling. Was living in Key West. Got into contact with somehow, I don't know the full origin story of it, but he met up with Troy Bow. Troy Bow was also playing bocce or softball, I think, in Big Pine at the time with this guy Mike Hess, who Mike Hess owned Cudjoe Fish and Sales up there in Cudjoe. And Mike Hess was from New York originally and grew up a big time wrestler, college wrestler. But his family actually had owned Cudjoe Sales for a long time. And then there was another guy in Key West, Randy Lehan, who I think they played softball with too, who worked for the Coconut Telegraph or Jimmy Buffett's little magazine that they had. And so all those guys were kind of came together at the same time and wanted to start the club. At the same time, I think Coach Hughes got wind of it and was really getting involved in trying to get the club going. So we started the club, Republic Wrestling Club, which is the name of our wrestling club today. I want to say 97. So it was around my 8th grade, 9th grade year. And we started the club, and the original club where the Pal Gym is now, the old Glen Archer Gym, is where we had the club. Bob Krantz got a hold of a mat, which is really what you need. All you need is a space and a mat to start wrestling. He got a hold of an old blue mat from I don't know where they got it from. And that's where we started wrestling. And the first people in the club were myself, Pedro Lara, and a few other football players that Coach Hughes sent over there. And that was the first exposure I had to wrestling. And before that, Coach Hughes actually took a few of us up to see a dual meet between Coral Park and Southridge. And we got to meet the coach of Southridge, who's a legendary Hall of Fame coach, Jim Husk, who I'm very good friends with now today. We got to go to the wrestling room there and kind of get exposed to it, because being from Key West, we were never exposed to it at all. And I was like, man, this is awesome. And then Pedro and I was the only one that really stuck with it. And we stayed wrestling with the club with at that point, it was Mike Hess, Coach Bow, and Coach, we call him Sid, but Randy Lehan. And those three guys were coaching us. And then we had Bob Krantz kind of as the guy running the fundraising behind the club and stuff like that. And then we started traveling, wrestling in USA wrestling tournaments. And then we had a few more guys show up, Justin Duck, Tony Lombardi, some other just people here and there. We started getting the kids club. Ralph Major was one of the first kids in the kids club, Coach Hess's kids, who all ended up being really good wrestlers. And then we were going all over the state. Back then, there only used to be weekend tournaments in Brandon. Brandon's was a powerhouse wrestling program. And so we used to drive up to Tampa to Brandon like every other weekend. We were trying to get the team started my sophomore year, but we couldn't get started. All of a sudden, again, whether you call it serendipity, whatever it is, I think it was God put this all together, that Justin Klein was moving down from Okeechobee. He was a already an established wrestler in Okeechobee, a state qualifier, and a pretty good wrestler. So when he came down that year, that was kind of the impetus of us getting the program started. We were already trying to get it going, but they basically allowed Justin to wrestle as a one-man team that year. So that year, while we were wrestling in the club after football season got done, Justin was practicing with us, but he was going to compete, and he was with Coach Bow and Coach Sid, and they traveled just them two and Justin. So that kind of was what we needed to make everything happen. The next year we had the first full season as a team, and then from there the rest has been history. So it all kind of came together at this perfect timing that these people were in town all at the same time. Like I said, a huge credit is with Coach Hughes really getting it done as the football coach, and him being a legendary coach himself. And we had these great people, these great wrestling minds here in Key West, and it just started from there. And I know a lot of people had wished that we had wrestling for a long time before that. It has a pretty good history in Florida already as it is.
And so, what is the combination? What makes football and wrestling such a complementary to the other?
Well, just on face value, when you look at it, the transition, wrestling teaches you so much about leverage, about body positioning, about using your hands. So that part right there, and your footwork, so much on footwork. So that right there transitions a lot from football, from wrestling to football. And then the other thing, the non-tangible things, is that wrestling gets you to another level of understanding hard work, understanding how to overcome adversity, and the idea of that one-on-one battle, right? So, football, where you're doing, there's 11 one-on-one battles every play, right? And you need to learn how to compete on that one-on-one level. Well, wrestling, that's all it is learning how to, and that's the big thing, is learning how to compete and finding something in yourself. The difference is in football, you can have a bad play, you can miss an assignment, and it might not be known or seen, right? And you can, there could be blame on other people that the play wasn't successful. Well, wrestling, it's all you. So it really helps you in that idea of competing one-on-one when it comes to football, and just the mentality. Like I always said, like, wrestling is so hard that it made football more enjoyable for me. because even though football is really hard and it's different, what it takes to be successful in wrestling, just a whole nother level of intensity.
And you mentioned Ralph Major. He's one of our state champions. And so he was part of the youth league, which I didn't even realize we had a youth league going back that far. So I'm already learning a lot. So he ends up becoming a state champion his senior year, right?
Yeah. So Ralph was one of our first batch of youth wrestlers coming through. Super successful already as a, all American stuff as a young age. Coach Mike took him all over the place, and he used to practice with us. So as a little guy, he's like because he's about 7 years younger than me. So he's a little guy, and he's coming in and wrestling in our high school practices with our like light weights and stuff. So we always had our eyes on Ralph. And then part of the full circle thing is my first year back after college was Ralph's senior year, and I worked with Ralph every day. I was in to get him ready for that state title, and we knew he could win that state title. When he won that state title, that was kind of like that final hook in me, like this is what I want to stay and do this. It was a cathartic moment for me, especially since what happened to me in my state championship run when I got hurt in the state finals, and my football career was done. Everything after that, and coming full circle, coming back, knowing Ralphie since he was little, him winning that state title, man, it was an emotional moment. Also, we had a bunch of state finalists already, and we felt like we were cursed because we had myself, Tony Lombardi, and Justin Duck all go to the state finals and make it to the state championship match 3 years in a row. We all, I got hurt in that match. Justin Duck lost a 1-point match, and Tony lost like a 1-point match. And we felt like, man, we were kind of cursed. And we felt like Ralph winning that title was kind of a validation of the program and breaking that cycle that we had felt like we were in.
And the other state champion was Max Lama
in 2012.
And so, talk about that adversity that you went through, if you don't mind, Coach, since you brought it up. Your senior year, you're a standout football player. You're competing at wrestling at the state level. Take us back to that moment, if you don't mind, and share what happened and then how you faced that adversity.
Yeah, so I mean, it was up until this point, at that point in my life, it was the hardest thing, the toughest thing that had ever happened to me, the worst thing that ever happened to me. So I already had committed and signed to go play football at FIU. Myself and another Key West boy, Patrick Lewin, one of my best friends. I had my goal, besides, that was always been my goal my whole life, was to play college football. And that's everything I thought about and did was for that. But along that way, that's why I started wrestling, was to help me with football. Along that way, I fell in love with wrestling, and my junior year I made it to the state tournament and didn't have a great state tournament. My goal became immediately after that also to win a state title. And putting the work in, I had a great senior year. I think going into the state tournament, I only had like 2 or 3 losses. And then, I had a great state tournament run. I knew there were some matches that were going to be tough. I had to get through. And then, make it to my state quarterfinal match was brutal, made it to overtime. State semis, I had a really good match, won big time. And then going to that state finals match, I'm wrestling a tough kid who was a 2-time state champ. But I thought it was a winnable match. We felt like it was a winnable match. So now we're going into the highlight of my life at that point, of being into the state championship match. And early and onto the match, the kid tries to throw me. I stopped the throw, but my leg got caught. And I was trying to describe it to the kids the other day. And basically what happened to my knee is almost similar to what happened to Tyreek Hill. So if you saw how bad Tyreek Hill injury was, mine was kind of like that. Full dislocation in the knee. I tore all 4 of the cruciate ligaments, and then I also tore a nerve, and the nerve was the sticking point. And at that point, I thought, oh, I'll be all right. We'll have surgery. I didn't know how bad it was. We'll have surgeries, and I'll come back. And then going into college, FIU was great. They stuck with their commitment to me. They tried to rehab it, but the main thing we were trying to figure out was if that function. Basically, I lost what's called the dorsiflexion, the ability to lift your foot up. I have drop foot, so I had a nerve graft at that time, the state of the art, through University of Miami to try to get that nerve grafted, and the function never came back. So kind of like, they gave me a timeline, and if it's after 2 or 3 years, if it's not back, it's not going to come back, and it never came back. So I stayed on with FIU as an assistant coach, basically a student coach. Actually, like the head coach at St. Brendan's that we played last week, he was my offensive line coach at FIU.
Okay. Small
So
world.
I got to, sports, it is very small. So I got to talk to him, and he saw what I knew about football and kind of brought me on to help him out. And I also always knew I wanted to get into coaching. And, but yeah, it was tough, man. It's a dream shatter. It was life changing. I went through a dark time through college. My whole goal and everything I wanted to do was about that.
Mhm.
So when that wasn't there, that dream was gone. I kind of like lost myself and lost my identity in some way. And, even just helping coaching, I just wanted to be on that field playing. And at some point, I just even stepped away from that because it was too much after like year 5. Most of my guys already had graduated that I went through. I just kind of needed to focus on graduating college. And after that, my plan was to coach college football and be a grad assistant. And that's when I came home for that year, and I fell back in love with coaching and fell back in love with wrestling. Like I said, that Ralph Major winning that state title, I actually had an opportunity to go coach. Coach Hughes was trying to help get me to go get a GA under Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. There were some other opportunities. I graduate assistant, and I kind of had to make a decision. I was working at the high school. I loved being around the kids. I loved coaching, and that year in wrestling. And after Ralph won that title, and Coach Moeller at the time wanted me to take over, I was out on the boat one day, which is my other huge part of my life, huge passion. I was like, man, I don't know. I was like, I got to stay. This is, I think, what my calling is to stay here and do things and be a Conch and be in Key West and build this program. And that's kind of what happened. So, but yeah, I mean, that out of that tragedy of my injury came my passion for what gives me the coach. My passion for coaching and my passion for this program was born out of that tragedy. So a lot of times they say the light comes right before the dark, and the darkest moments bring out that light. So that's kind of how I look at it. Like that was obviously was part of God's plan, because the impact in what I've done over these last 18 20 years, 18 19 years, has been, my life's been more fulfilled than I could ever imagine if that didn't happen.
Thank you for sharing that, Coach. I wasn't sure even to bring it up, right? It's such an important story, and I appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing it. And you mentioned talking about it with your players. How does that, having gone through that, help you appreciate the grind and relate to the difficulty and also the vulnerability that in one moment you're ready to win the state championship, and then the next you're having to regroup and figure out where to go. And what was it also in you already to keep fighting and push? Who helped push you?
Yeah, I mean, well, through that time period, is definitely my family had my back, and my parents are amazing, and my whole family was with me, not just my parents, but and I include my parents, my dad Danny, but also my dad Billy, my mom's husband, who's like my father. I always say I'm blessed to have two dads, two amazing dads, and then my mom and then my grandmother, my siblings. They helped me get through that time, because it was, that college time was rough for me, not losing that dream. But yeah, as far as going back to the I don't really talk about myself to my athletes, and I think like Miguel talked about that the other day. That's, to me, that's like, I think it just came up because they were asking about what place I had gotten, and the story came up, and I was like, well, my injury was similar to Tyreek Hill, but I don't really talk about myself, but I talk about our past athletes a lot and what they've been through. The big thing, one of the big things we teach, and is, and that's, I think, one of the goals of athletics, is athletics should be a way of teaching, like a microcosm of what you're going to experience in life. And you're going to experience adversity in life. What successful people do is learn how to figure out a way to overcome that adversity. Coach Hughes, I go back to, I have all these things that people have said to me. Coach Jerry Hughes used to say to us all the time, and I tell my kids all the time, the true test of a person is how they overcome adversity. One thing we preach, that you're gonna get knocked in, you're gonna get punched in the face, figuratively in sports, and you're gonna, even life, it's gonna be even harder. But do we feel sorry for ourselves, or do you tie up your bootstraps tighter, pull up your pants, and get ready to do some work to make it happen? And so I going through those things that allows me to, that I've been through it, to pass that message to our athletes.
So you've been coaching 16 years now.
Yeah, so I was, so this last season was my 16th year back at Key West High School as the head coach. And then I had 2 years as an assistant coach, so 18 years overall.
Last weekend, I saw Christina McPherson, and I mentioned to her that I was having you on the podcast. And she said, well, I hired him. So do you remember that? You weren't sure if you wanted to teach or not. She's like, well, give it a try.
Yeah, they were looking for an economics teacher, and Miss Mack had known I got my degree in economics, and I think she saw my dad somewhere, and I was that summer. And she says, "What's Chaz doing?" And he's like, "You don't know yet. He's trying to figure out if he's going to coach." She's like, "Well, we had an economics job," and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, and I don't know if I want to be involved in going back to the high school. I want to be at the college level. I want to coach the college level, and yeah, like I said, as soon as I got back into the classroom, being back at QS High School, it just felt like being at home. I grew up on this campus. I grew up around QS High School related activities and athletics my entire life. So, like I said, it just felt like it was a godsend. And like I said, after that Ralph won that state title, man, I was hooked.
And like Miguel said, you referenced Miguel from the last episode, and like he said, he wants to keep it rolling as long as he can. Is that your plan too? Just keep it rolling?
Yeah, I love coaching. I'm not coaching football right now at the level of capacity I'd want to coach football because I have a very young daughter. So that's kind of hindered me. I've had to take a break from football. I still help out as much as I can, but I want to, I love coaching. And as long as I'm here at QS High School, I'm going to be coaching.
So the program is growing so much. We added a girls program. How long have we had a girls program?
So we've had a sanctioned girls program. This will be our fourth season, I believe. Yeah, this will be our fourth season. So we had it 3 years already. So in 2022, they sanctioned girls wrestling, and I had one girl on the team. We've always had girls that wrestled, but it wasn't a sanctioned sport. So they would have they could practice with us, but there was non FHSA sanctioned tournaments and stuff. And we've always had girls, and a lot of times girls would have to wrestle with the boys. But in 2022, the FHSA sanctioned the girls wrestling, and then we had one girl on the team, but she wrestled on the boys team that year. And it kind of happened late in the year, they were kind of what they were going to say at first they were going to sanction it. Then the FHSA board of directors said no, it got tabled. Then at the beginning of the fall, they decided to sanction it. It just was I wasn't prepared to do it that year. So the next year we knew we had this young lady, Shayla Figuera, coming back. And then at the same time, we had two girls move in that were really, really good wrestlers. And it all kind of fell together again, like a godsend type situation for us to start the program that year. And
we've had a lot of success early with the girls.
Yeah, so that first year we had both the Briggs sisters make it to the state finals. They both lost close matches that year. We've had girls qualify to the state tournament every year, and we've had a lot of good, the girls do really well. The tough thing about the girls is we only have one classification right now in the state of Florida. So our district and region for girls is really, really tough. Because South Florida, our region's always tough no matter what. Having just that one class, it's really tough. And the girls wrestling it's one of the fastest growing sports in the U.S. I mean, every year there's more and more girls, and they're just get exponentially better every year. But for me, it's been it's really reinvigorated me as a coach. I love coaching the girls. I really have a blast coaching the girls.
That's good stuff. I did read that it's the number one growing sport, fastest growing sport in the nation. I think I was talking with Andrew about flag football for girls. There's so many more opportunities for girls to compete at the high school level now. So that's really cool. What's the difference between coaching boys wrestling or girls wrestling? Are there any key differences?
Yeah, there's differences for sure. There's definitely differences. So one thing I'll say is that the girls are easier to coach as far as you could show them something and teach it to them and they get it a little bit faster than the boys get it. When girls are locked in, they're way more locked in than boys. So their focus and work ethic overall, I've seen from the girls we've had are way, way more locked in. So that makes it a lot more fun that they really are into it. You have to, obviously the emotional side is a little bit different. So the one thing I'll say that's a little bit different that I've noticed with girls is they the self-doubt maybe comes in a little bit more. So instead of me like talking to a girl like, oh, you're wrestling this girl, she's good, you need to be careful about this, well, like I have to gas them up. So like when I got the girls do better when like I and just give them full confidence, like be and that because that's one of the things that we see is that I've seen is that the girls don't perform if they're not completely confident. So from my aspect, I have to completely just continue to give them confidence and talk about like, let's put all that other stuff behind. And we got to deal with guys a little bit, but that's a big difference, you know. I've noticed, and they always get mad at me because they say I'm too nice to them compared to the boys. So when I actually get mad at them, they are excited about it. So that's a little bit different too. But yeah, but you know, and then you got to deal with the emotional stuff, and sometimes it just depends on what's going on. But it's just like anything, you know, when you're dealing with different athletes, and not all the girls are the same either. With different athletes, they're all different, and so you know you can't coach every single kid the same exact way, and you can't hold them to the same standards. You could have your standards of what you expect for the program and what the non-negotiable things are, but you have to coach. You have to build a rapport and relationship with every kid and coach them how you know it's gonna, you know, what's gonna pull those strings on that particular athlete, because everyone's different.
I love that you recognize that. You've been coaching, you say, 18 years here in Key West. How long does it take to develop that kind of emotional intelligence, right? Is that something you knew out of the gates, or you've had to grow to learn that?
I think I definitely got better with it. You know, you get better at it as time goes on. You know, being a teacher also helps that. You know, I would say I grew up around coaches. You know, so you know, as from a little kid on, you know, I was with my dad at in meetings. I was with my dad at the coaches' parties. I was with them watching games on Saturday and Sunday. I was obviously with him, listening to him, and I had a lot of exposure to a lot of really good coaches in Key West, and then at the college level, some good coaches. So that definitely, I think, gave me a leg up getting into it, being exposed, and you get to see how all these different coaches handle stuff and how they respond to different things, and everyone's different. And then also with my own experience, right? You have to continue to grow throughout that tenure or whatever you're doing, because times change, kids change, and from year to year they're different. You know, so I've gotten better, I think, in understanding that. You know, the course, the guys I coached 10, 15 years ago will say like I've gone soft, and that's just what kids say. But I can't. The things maybe I did 10, 15 years ago wouldn't have the same response today.
Exactly.
But yeah, that I think that's one thing we do well at my whole coaching staff is because I think I did it with all the coaches that coached for me are guys that I coached. They, you know, we try to build those relationships and we become really close, and wrestling just kind of, you know, causes that to happen anyway, because we spend so much time together. And I really try to promote like a culture of family. And that's kind of like what I feel like and I love these kids like they're on they are my own family. So we really tried to build that rapport and let them understand that like everything we're doing is for your own best interest, whether you like it or not. And we have fun, you know, all that stuff. But when it's time to get the business, it's time to get the business.
You mentioned your coaching staff. Tell me about your coaches. How many coaches coach with you? And let's give them a shout out.
My two main assistants are my main assistant is St. Pierre Analyst, who was a great football player and wrestler, two-time state placer, state runner-up himself. And then he played football in college at Murray State and Georgia Military Academy. And he's been just, he's great to have back and just a huge help to us. And then my other assistant is another Key West wrestling great, Angelo Gibb, who is another state finalist for us. And then, we have different guys that come help. Gavin Garcia, he's one of my best friends. He's in the Coast Guard. He wrestled for the Coast Guard Academy. He helps us. And then just the old wrestlers will pop in here and there and help out. Ralph Major will make his appearance here and there and help out throughout the season. Caleb Ash, another one of our multiple time state placers, will come in. Guys will come into towns. We always have a good amount of people that are coming in to help.
That's that Conch pride, right?
That's right.
It's hard to define in words. You just have to watch and see it. And what you're talking about is that. So the 2025 season was fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights, some of the wrestlers. I know you had a lot of seniors that you graduated. And then let's look at 2026 and what this team looks like and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, last year we had, we had a standout year again. I think it was highlighted by Alfredo Corrales. He ended up finishing fourth. His bracket was really tough, but he was very close to being in that finals match and competing for a state title. But he broke all kinds of records last year. I think he broke the career wins record that Max Yama had with over 150 wins in his career. He broke the career pins record, those are two. When you talk about wrestling records, that's like the home run record. That's the record you want, the most pins and the most wins. Yeah, so he had a fantastic year. And then we had James Searcy had the state qualifier and was one of those guys as senior leaders that he came back from adversity. He had a tore his meniscus right before the season started, got surgery right before the season started, and had to come back and fight through that and made his way to the state tournament, lost the match to place at states. Abram Kinnett, was one of our hammers that same thing, right? The week of states, he tears his hamstring really bad and had to wrestle on one leg. And the guts he showed in that state tournament to basically wrestle on one leg majorly in pain and to give himself in position where he was in the match to place, just as a testament to him. And then on the girls' side, we had a good season with the girls. Like I said, that region and district's so tough, but we had a breakout with our freshman Maria Halushka, who's she is going to be something special.
I think she's going to win the state championship. You heard it here first. She's going to win the state championship. I got it written down right here.
That's she's like one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever had. So she grew up doing jiu-jitsu at the PAL gym and started competing at a high level with jiu-jitsu. She's competed at world championships, all kinds of stuff. So she came into us with that background of being a high level grappler already. And now she's just taking off on wrestling. So we're really excited about the future with her.
And are your wrestlers already working out? Are you guys on the mat in the gym already? And when does the season start?
Never stops.
Never stops.
Never stops. So yeah, it's a year-round thing, except for the guys that play other sports. But for especially the lightweights and middleweights and those type of guys and girls, as soon as we get done with the regular season, we take like a week or two off, and then we get to our Olympic styles. So in the spring and summer, we wrestle freestyle and Greco-Roman, which is the styles you see on the Olympics. And then, we're still, strength training. The summer, we're still wrestling. We go to camps. We take a little bit off in July, come back, school starts. We get rolling back into folk style, which is the style we wrestle in high school and college in the U.S. Yeah, and then we're going to tournaments throughout the year. We practice in our club 2 times a week, lift 3 or 4 times a week. So the lifting never stops, and we're always training. And then, a lot of our guys are football players, so they're in football season, but the rest of the guys and girls are still training.
So I mentioned earlier, and we talked about that, you're a multi-sport athlete. Do you encourage your wrestlers to try other sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, especially like I said, most of our upper weights our middle and upper weights are football players. So we always have those 2 sport athletes. The problem we have is like some of our lower weights, when you're wrestling like a lighter weight, those guys that are in lighter weights are kids that have been wrestling since they're young. And those kids are kind of dedicated to wrestling all year round. So one of the ways we get those guys that are lightweights or our guys caught up to kids that have been wrestling their whole life is they kind of start to wrestle all year round. But a lot of our kids play multiple sports. They go to track afterwards. They do other things. And being a multi-sport athlete is good. But sometimes it is like, to catch up, you have to get experience wrestling. And the only way you can get that experience and is through wrestling kind of year round and getting matches, because you have to get experience in matches. And that's the only way you really can catch up. Alfredo, let's say, Alfredo, going from a freshman that only had 9 wins to having his last 3 years having 40 plus, 50 plus wins, he had to put a lot of time in year round to close that gap.
And we have Ralph Ritchie in college right now wrestling.
Yeah, Ralph, actually we have two athletes right now. We have 3 actually athletes wrestling, but Ralph Ritchie and Abram Kinnett are both wrestling at St. Thomas.
Okay.
And then Natalie Arguello is wrestling for UCF's team right now. and she did really good. She made it to the national championships last year.
What are some of the challenges that you face as a coach here in Key West and in general?
Yeah, so the distance is always a challenge, right? So for us, all of our sports, for wrestling, really really big challenge is that travel. So if you live in Miami, within an hour, you could go train with other people. You can go to a weekend tournament. You can, wake up at 7 o'clock, go to a tournament, come back, be home by 4 o'clock, get those matches and experience all that stuff. On the regular season, you can compete in a lot of places very close. So for us, that we're behind the eight ball already, just with that distance. Even like Coral Shores has a good program. The coach up there, Chaz Jimenez, is one of my closest friends. He's doing a great job. They're 2 hours away, and we do stuff together, but they're 2 hours away. So, creates a lot of challenges. There's financial issues with it. For every tournament we go to, most of the tournaments are 2 days. We're overnighting it. We're staying in a hotel or something almost every weekend. And we're trying to get the best competition that we can. So we're traveling all over the state. And like I said, just even like a weekend tournament, like last weekend, we went to a little tournament in Homestead. Wake up at 5 a.m, get up there, weigh in, wrestle, drive back. I'm the one that does all the driving, so then I don't have to worry about the
Right.
But that plays a huge challenge in it, And then you just have your other challenges with coaching that you face with society today in general. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's other things that we're doing. And you have to get kids to prioritize what's going on in that sport, and understand the work that goes into it. And that's just tough in general, to get people to really buy in and to trust the process is a whole nother challenge in itself. But we as in Key West face that geographic problem. And then, the other thing that, I was talking to you about before was that, right, in Florida today, you have a complete free agency of high school athletics. So, I'm always impressed that across the board, pretty much in our athletics at Key West High School, we continue to have a lot of success. We continue to have teams that are going to the regional finals, teams that are making it to the regional semifinals, Final Four, winning districts, winning regions, because, we have what we have. Our kids from Big Pine down or whatever they are, the lower keys is our kids. Mm-hmm. Now, it's also a blessing on the other side of it, because we don't have to deal with the same stuff that some of these other coaches are dealing with in the mainland. But, we see it in every year, like, we're going to play a team and all of a sudden this team has 20 new kids or a whole new lineup. This next week we're playing a Northwestern. Northwestern has 35 new kids transferred in. 35 transfers.
The whole team.
35 transfers. So, and they already won a state title last year. So, and that's just across the board. So it can make things difficult. In wrestling, we see it a lot. We see, I know, in wrestling, football, basketball, baseball, we're seeing these kids, kids come over. Kids can leave in the middle of the season and go play at another school. Kids can go from one sport to another. We've had in some sports where a kid plays football at one school and then after football season transfers and wrestles at another school. And then we have the homeschooling, which is another thing. They just do the Florida virtual school. They go wherever they want. Kids don't even live in the same county. So, the biggest thing is I can't change that, but it does create difficulties. But like I said, I gotta look at the positive. The positive is that our kids are our kids and we're going to develop our kids and we're going to go and compete. But like I said, I think people have to have a greater appreciation of the success that we have in all of our programs at Key West High School. It's actually pretty amazing. It was always amazing that this little island always produced so many good athletes and we had always so many good teams. But now, given the, what the barriers that we face, it's even more amazing what we do.
It is really special, and I know we're partial, but I do believe that it's one generation after another, like you talked about, right? Your daddy was a coach. All the coaches that you've been with and their kids play, and we build a winning tradition, and you take time to build programs like youth programs, whether it's Junior Football League or the PAL League or your Conch Republic Wrestling, so that we can build them and teach them the skills young and have travel teams and take them back and forth up and down the road like you're talking about till you can't even see straight anymore, so that they can compete and hats off to you and all the coaches who coach our kids. For us as fans to be able to sit back and want one win after another, sometimes we need to be reminded of the hard work and dedication that you guys put into it. You're talking about the free agency. Can't help but shift the conversation to college sports. I know you're a big football fan. What do you think about the transfer portal and how it's affecting college football? And do you think that we'll have a national championship team that's not undefeated, that's got one or two losses? And are those things related?
As far as the I think that the transfer portal needs to all of the transfer portal and the NIL, in my opinion, needs to have there needs to be a gathering of minds and come up with some way of regulating it a little bit more. I think a complete prohibition on transfers was a horrible idea the way it used to be. And then I thought that the complete prohibition on players getting some money and getting paid for their actual name and image and likeness was a horrible idea. And obviously the NCAA was so draconian and old on it that it backfired in their face as times progress. And then it caused all the things that were going on, illegal backdoor deals and stuff like that. So if they would have, the 20, 25 years ago or 30 years ago, if they would have addressed that, we'd have a system today that isn't what it is today. Because I don't like they got to put some limits on the transfer portal at some point, and they got to put some limits on NIL and money. And again, I think if a kid's if they're selling your jerseys, you should be able to make some money off of your jerseys being sold. But if if we can give kids a livable wage to go to college, I remember my teammates in college, we were broke. You're getting and then you're like trading kids your card at the because we had unlimited food at the cafeteria. You're trading that to get cash and stuff like that. So that was crazy. But now today, for these guys to be making sometimes more money than the NFL player would make, where goes amateurism at that point? So there has to be some limits on that at some level, because right now it's just the cat's out of the bag and they don't know what to do. On the other side of it, as far as what you were saying about will there be an undefeated team? I think there might be an undefeated team. Hoping the Hurricanes are the undefeated team this year, but we'll see what after this weekend what happens. I think it is going to get harder and harder to have those undefeated teams, because what we are seeing because of the transfer portal, and it's actually making college football there's more parity, so it's making it a little bit more fun to watch. As far as that, there's going to be crazy upsets every week. Because what used to happen is, and all the old coaches used to talk about when I was growing up, coaches would recruit certain kids knowing that those kids might not even meet get playing time, but those kids weren't playing for another school.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. That's Bear Bryant was famous for that in Alabama back in the day. So he would recruit kids knowing that those kids probably are never going to play for him, but they're not going to go play at Georgia or Auburn. So now you're getting kids that maybe couldn't crack the lineup at one place are getting a chance to go play other places. And we're seeing that there is this much talent in the United States that these teams can compete.
You mentioned Miami. I know you're a Hurricane fan. You think they're going to pull it off in Tallahassee? Beat the Noles in Tallahassee? Is that possible?
I mean, we're favored. The Canes are favored, but I think it's going to be a classic UM-FSU game. It's going to be a one-score type game. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I think up front, and that's where football games are won and lost, is up front on both sides of the ball. I think Miami's better, and that's where it's going to be won and lost.
All right. Well, as of this recording, we've got 2 days. Is it a night game? Is it 7:30?
7:30 in Doak Camp.
All right.
They just renovated it.
Yeah. So Coach, I there's something else I didn't tell you. Is this is actually the first episode of a new show that I'm calling the Conch. All right. And so I'm having a new segment to wrap it up, and I'm calling it Conch Connections. And you've already dropped a little bit of this information now, but I want to establish some of the connections, some of the people that you're connected to. It's a common question when you meet somebody from Key West. They want to know, if you're a multi-generation Conch and who's your mama and daddy. So tell me a little bit about your family and some of the other Conchs that you're connected to.
So, yeah, we're multi-generational. On my mom, I think on my dad's side, we might be 3 or 4 generations. On my mom's side, it's 5 or 6 generations. So I think my daughter's a 6th or 7th. I know it goes back to my grandmother's grandmother for sure. So yeah, we're definitely back there. We've done it before. It goes back a while. The paper records stop at some point. So yeah, so we're definitely connected to everyone. I always tell people, when you date another conch girl, you're a real conch. When you date another conch girl, you got to find out if you're cousins or not. And I've had to do that a couple times.
Yeah.
Are we related? We should figure this out. Yeah. So like, as far as I grew up around all the police people. As far as coaching connections in Key West, obviously my dad coached here forever. My dad's cousin Ralph Enriquez, is head coach and our cousin Little Ralphie is the coaches at the baseball program. So we have those connections there. Yeah, I mean those are, as far as, so that's a good coaching lineage right there, just in our family.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I gotta give a shout out. Let me interrupt you real quick. I gotta give your daddy a shout out because I love your daddy. You know, he's he's so important in my life. Talk about a coach. He I've got to give him credit because he saw potential in me professionally that I didn't see in myself. I'm just in there doing what I'm doing, and early in my career, and he'd already finished one career and was on his second career, and he kind of opened some doors and dropped some thoughts in my head that allowed me to move forward and think in my career in different ways. And so I'm always grateful for your dad. And I don't know a tougher character than your dad either. So I know he's watching. So what's up, Danny? I love you. Good stuff. Your nephew, Preston Hurst, P, another standout athlete in Key West. So yeah, you talk about the lineage. And now you've got a lot of uncles, Key West uncles, right? That maybe aren't your blood family, but talk about some of those guys that you're connected to, your daddy's boys.
Yeah, so and I grew up around all these guys, and they're all sports people. So, Pat Labrada, I consider him my uncle. Was my dad's best friend. That's his best friend. I consider his son Max like my brother. We call, I got the Theos. Theo Bobby Menendez. When I was growing up, we had Theo Tommy. That's Tommy Roberts. And then Coach Chuck is like an uncle to me. His son Chaz is like an older big brother to me. And now it's just awesome for me to be with Andrew, because Andrew's like family too. And yeah, we had all those guys. There's so many, I can't even think of all of them. But and then growing up around Coach James and Coach Wise, who are like family to me. It's a pretty special thing. And like I said, I feel blessed to have been around and all those great coaches my whole life, including my own coaches in wrestling too.
It is good stuff. And that's one of the reasons, all those names that you just dropped is one of the reasons why I had to do this spin-off show called The Conch, because I want to have an episode with all of those guys, and I can't call it The Joy of Baseball or Bring Joy, right? So that's the whole purpose, to have this new show, and nobody better than you to be episode 1. You mentioned your daughter a couple times, so you're starting. You got a family now, another generation of conchs. You're gonna let her wrestle.
Oh, I would love for her to wrestle. But it's gonna be, I'm not gonna push on her, but she will grow up in that wrestling room. She's already been in that wrestling room before she could walk. So she likes going in there. She goes to football games with me. I force her to watch football with me sometimes. If she wrestles, that would be amazing. If she just wants to be a cheerleader or whatever else, it'll be up to her. So one thing I did take away from my dad is my dad never forced my brother or myself to play football. Yeah, that just naturally happened. We wanted to, and I think it's better like that.
What besides coaching and teaching, you mentioned fishing. What are some of the other things that you love about Key West?
Well, that the community itself is just, there's nothing like it. It's hard to, like you're saying, it's hard to describe. I think I just felt it even at a young age. And there's some moments that I can really think about, like I was 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old when we went to the state championship game for football in Daytona in 1989. That stands out to me like
I got the chills.
that stands out to me like it was yesterday. I remember being freezing cold, but just that whole island showing up to Daytona when it was like 30 degrees or whatever. Those then later on, that run we had in the mid 90s in baseball. I went to all those state championship games, and when it was in Sarasota, the whole island showing up. We're playing a team that, I forget the first game. I know the year we won, 95, might have been against Bishop Kenny, I think. But these people aren't that far away, and the whole stands is Key West people and Miss Webster, getting up there doing give me a K, you know, the Key West thing, and you know, that whole island, everyone up there. Those things that stand out to me and my, you know, and me growing up, and you know, Bobby Menendez speeches before games, you know, just everything, all those things, and it just is ingrained in my soul, you know, and always feeling like it's us against everyone else, and Key West people always have each other's backs no matter what, you know, and the island mentality. And that's just always been, it's just part of ingrained, like I say, ingrained in me. And it's just special. It's so special. And, you know, we see it every year. We cheer for our kids no matter what. And we come together. And it's something that's so unique. And that's, like I said, we go back to, like we were talking about the free agency thing. We are still a one team, one town mentality. That old school mentality of, like, you know, you cheer for your high school where you grow up. You go to the high school where you grow up, which kind of is a lost thing around in a lot of places now, especially in Florida.
We are a city like no other, that's for sure. And you're such a part of this history. And just, you know, keep it rolling. And I'm gonna get in that Bobby Menendez gym and I'm gonna watch me a wrestling match.
They're fun, man. It's exciting. It is exciting.
I'm ready for it. Thanks for being with me, Coach. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Go Conch.
Yeah, baby. Go Conch.
I'm Joy Newlish, and I appreciate you tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, drop a review, share, and subscribe, because there's a lot of good stuff on tap. You can find more joyful content on YouTube, the socials, or check my website at joynewlish.com. Now go surround yourself with the things that bring joy to your world. Until next time, much love.